started. Okay, we're going to get started. It's 7 o'clock. I got reminded of that. Thank you everyone for coming along to this workshop on the Civic Centre Cafe. I'd like to welcome Louise Drummond, Chair of the Gawler Business Development Group, also here with us this evening. I think that I'd like to welcome council members and council staff. We've got David Barrett and Henrietta with us this evening. There are Councillor White will be a few minutes late and Councillor Shank, Deputy Mayor Shanks will be 15 minutes late, he told me today. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on Kaurna land this evening. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So this is a workshop, which is a type of informal gathering. It's been convened in accordance with Section 90A of the Local Government Act for the purpose of discussing opportunities for the future use of the Civic Centre Cafe seating area and kitchen. This session, and I've said this before, is solely for the purpose of information sharing and gathering, and not for the purpose of debating or building consensus positions or otherwise discharging council's deliberative and decision-making functions. I'd also like to welcome anyone who might be watching on YouTube this evening. Members of our community are encouraged to listen. Louise will be speaking with us this evening. There's no set agenda and no minutes will be taken as part of a workshop. A copy of the information presented at this session will be made available on Council's website. Oh, you're here. Awesome. On Council's website, and that will go up. When will that go up, David? Tomorrow? It will be up there tomorrow. To limit disruption, I'm going to turn my phone off or silent, put it on silent. If you need to take a phone call, please take it outside. It's quite disruptive if you're talking on the phone while we're having a workshop. So please just do that if it's an emergency phone call. Otherwise, put it on silent. I don't think there's any need to go into confidence. I haven't been advised as such, so I don't think that will be an issue. That won't be an issue, will it, CEO? No. So I don't think that's relevant this evening to go into confidence and discuss anything in that forum. So the way we will deal with this session is David's going to give us a presentation. Then I'm going to ask Louise to come and speak with us. I'm assuming Louise has some ideas for the Civic Centre, which is wonderful. So thank you, Louise, for coming along and sharing those ideas. And then we'll have a discussion about that. So I'll hand over to David Barrett, who will present. I think it's about the history. It's a bit of background information for people's interests. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Mayor Redman. So as the Mayor mentioned, this is just a little bit of a deep dive into the past history of the cafe and how we've got to where we are now. So the original intent of the cafe was a social enterprise providing native foods as part of its menu. We had an opportunity to alleviate local unemployment, provide education and training and pathways for the broader community. The cafe operator in the original was expected to encourage young Aboriginal adults to train and work in the cafe and support the local Kaurna community by sourcing native foods for the cafe from the community where possible. The native food being served in the cafe would complement other programs being offered in the centre, such as Aboriginal visual and performing arts. And these activities would further stimulate national and international interest in the centre. We obviously had competitive neutrality considerations for our cafe operation. So all operations there needed to adhere to the national competition policy to ensure open and fair competition to achieve a balance between competitive principles and social objectives, competitive neutrality. So the intent there is to ensure that where a council, by way of its contractors or other, conducts business activities, providing goods or services, it doesn't have an unfair advantage over private sector by virtue of being in the local government sector. and any such business activities should be subject to the same conditions as private business. To achieve this, the most appropriate way for the cafe was to apply cost-reflective pricing principles to the operation. So therefore, a cup of coffee down there costs the same as it would at a local cafe, those sorts of things. In terms of the original design and management of the cafe, it wasn't designed with a fully operational commercial kitchen. It's a light commercial kitchen, so it doesn't have everything that a commercial kitchen would normally have. So we identified that additional resources and expertise would be required for large-scale catering, and such things may need to be brought in on an as-need basis. It was expected that the cafe would establish relationships with local businesses to deliver the catering for larger scale events. And the inaugural operator was required to enter into a social enterprise management agreement with council. This agreement included requirements such as opening hours, menu content, pricing, branding, and decor, and was developed in collaboration with the successful operator. Brief history rundown of the first process. In December 2017, we went to market with an expression of interest, established an evaluation panel. EOIs closed in February 2018, and shortlisted operators requested to submit a formal proposal in response to a request for tender in March. In April, we assessed the tenders, and then in May, we recommended a preferred operator to council. In June 2018, we negotiated with that operator to develop the agreement. In July, the agreement was presented to council. In August, it was executed, and in early 2019, cafe operations commenced. That was a year process in the lead up to the first operation, yes. The inaugural cafe operator was Red Centre Enterprises, traditionally an agribusiness that worked to give Indigenous communities access to commercial markets for produce and to generate employment. The operations at the time were based in the town of Gawler, and the proposal that they delivered to us was to have an Australian bush foods social enterprise cafe, using the best of local South Australian produce and providing high quality meals and have a significant positive impact within the community. The cafe was to provide employment programs and pathways, training opportunities and cultural education and awareness to both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal members of the community. So as just gone through, the agreement was executed in July 2018, February 2019, operations commenced. A year or so later, operations paused because of the COVID-19 restrictions that hit the world. In October 2020, we reported to council regarding the operations of the cafe and the obligations under the agreement, noting that the cafe hadn't reopened by that point, and we proposed to hold a confidential workshop with the operator. A month later, Red Centre Enterprises provided written notification that it was intending to withdraw from the management agreement. That notification was presented to council in December 2020, and we held a council workshop similar to this one in February 2021. Between the time this Red Centre left and the workshop, council staff were approached by community members suggesting a range of things. 3 businesses expressed interest in operating the cafe. Could we have a social inclusion program? Could it have rotational feature days, such as makers cafes or repair cafes and the like? Could it be a peak body fundraising cafe? Or should we just go for an open expression of interest and refine the offering based on all the responses? At the February 2021 workshop, we presented a few conversation starters. Should we undertake a formal procurement process to select a new operator under the model that already existed? Develop a new model and go to market on that? Work with community groups to have rostered cafe operation to assist with fundraising and awareness? Partner with training organisations to have a hospitality training centre, or operate the cafe itself, so council to operate the cafe. At that workshop, council members shared a range of ideas, including engaging qualified commercial cafe operator to manage it, partnering with training organisations, delivering a social inclusion program, engaging community groups or organisations, and developing a program of feature days, so similar to the conversation starters. And finally, co-locating the visitor centre with the cafe was another idea that was presented at that workshop. In February 2021, we presented a council report from the outcomes of that workshop with a proposal that we went to formal documentation, sourcing an operator, but didn't have any prescribed outcomes or limitations. The original tender did. It had to be native food based and it had to focus on Aboriginal employment. This time, council elected not to go that way. The only criteria was that the operator needed to be experienced in delivering general cafe services. We went through the process of an open market call, providing any potential business idea or proposal to be considered. And we had value add services and initiatives as part of the assessment process for that tender. So what would a cafe operator do to build in the community? Process for that, April 2021, we went out to market for a request for proposal. In May 2021, it was closed, assessed, and a preferred operator, being Metropolitan Canteens, was recommended to council. June 21, we had negotiation with the operator. July 21, we had the management agreement presented to council and executed. In August 2021, Metro Cafe operations commenced. In August 2022, we undertook the annual review of the cafe operations. And in September 22, that review was presented to the CCS committee, highlighting some financial sustainability concerns that Metropolitan Canteens had regarding the cafe. In October 2022, Metro Canteens SA advised council in writing that it was giving 3 months notice to terminate the agreement. We presented that to council in December. As a result of that resolution, a workshop was to be convened early in the new year, and that's what this workshop is tonight. So I thought it prudent to leave on the table some of those previous talking points.
Thank you, David.
Up there, and also to state that we've had some discussions also with Regional Development Australia, Barossa, Gawler, Adelaide Plains around training opportunities. That organisation recently ran intensive training in the Barossa Valley for hospitality staff, a 1 week on course of training, followed by a 1 week into operations with a specific link to the businesses in the Barossa, because the businesses in the Barossa were struggling to find workforce. So there is a proposal that's been sent through around this, and it could be a 1 week intense training, and then the next week those people operate the cafe on a rotational basis. So you have trained people, then they work in the cafe for a week, and hopefully we get pathways to employment. It does involve local business engagement. It also may not be sustainable ongoing. It could be delivered as a part thing, and then community groups as part as well. So just something to add to the conversation that's been presented through the RDA.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to hand over to Louise now. Louise, if you'd like to turn your mic on.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope I can get everything in 5 minutes. My suggestion is that you extend the amount of equipment and actually put in a commercial kitchen, not a really, really high level one, but certainly a better system than there is now. This could run on the basis that the Business Hub runs, where people have their time in the kitchen, they book it, they just book it through the manager of the centre, as Sam does with all the events. There are 3 commercial kitchens in Adelaide. One is the Christie's Downs Community House. One is a very high level one that only opened last week in Norwood. And the other one has been operating for several years at Findon and is well and truly booked. It fills a need. We are 40 kilometres from Adelaide, so I don't think there'd be too many people that would be looking to go that far. When I've done catering, I've actually hired the Tarlee Institute and used the kitchen there because I couldn't possibly cater for 100 people in my kitchen. So caterers could hire it for particular events. We could have chefs doing special classes and demonstrations there. It could attract new business to Gawler from elsewhere, being a central hub. It could attract people from the surrounding areas who want to do something themselves. Tony Piccolo would like to see the social inclusion aspect of this still, and that would only run Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 as the longest time. So that, but a commercial kitchen must be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It wouldn't cost an enormous amount to upgrade the equipment. There are auctions every week from failed restaurants and things in Adelaide with almost brand new equipment going very, very cheaply. So it wouldn't be a huge investment. It would become a centre for people interested in food and draw people into the Civic Centre. It could be that places like the WEA run courses. They run food courses in Adelaide. And I personally find going that far for a cooking class a bit difficult. But in the past, I mean, I went to things run by Gabrielle Gattay, Diane Olloway, Margaret Kirkwood. These are names that younger people won't know, but were really big foodie ones. And so they are popular. People nowadays are looking for more skills in cooking because that's something that has been falling off. There are a lot of businesses in Adelaide that have set up a new way of working because of the pandemic. And so where cafes and restaurants were not able to be open, they actually set up delivery services. And so people could order, they'd have a regular menu and people could order their food and either have it delivered or they would pick it up. I know in the Barossa, Stuart Oldfield was doing that when he couldn't have his restaurant open. And so they just have a limited menu. People say what they want and they get it at a price that is comparable to a whole lot of other food delivery services, but probably from a very much better cook. And it's something that I think we could see as really promoting the local industries, food production here. It could still include the native food components, and that could be an aspect of it. That would give the opportunity for classes in how to use native foods and grow the interest in that area, because there is an interest coming with that. I have printed off some things that I had spoken to a couple of the councillors about this concept, and there are links on that information, which I'm happy to email to everybody, where you can have a look at the businesses that are already doing this sort of thing.
Great. That'd be really good.
And the commercial kitchen in Findon Ben Stokes was very happy to have some people come and have a look at the operation and see how he goes about it and what it is. He charges at the moment $30 an hour to hire it, but he has to put that up because his electricity bill has gone through the roof. So he is going to have to put that up a bit. Christie's Downs charges $47.50 for a business and $39, I think it is, on the for community groups.
Yeah.
It could be community groups teaching people how to cook really strict budget meals that help people in the crisis that we have so many people here in, with mortgage repayments skyrocketing. I think there's a lot of scope, and it centres on this being a civic centre and being something that is for the ratepayers of Gawler.
Thank you, Louise. You're more than welcome to stay and join in the conversation. I'm going to open it up for different councillors to have their say on different ideas. Maybe they want to comment on Louise's ideas, on the background, or their own ideas. So councillor Hennessy, I think you had your.
Yes, Mayor. May I ask questions? Is that, I just want to draw a little bit more information out from Louise. Thank you, Louise. So what I think I hear you say is that we could be running a cafe during daylight hours because so if we match the library, we would need to do a Saturday morning, for example, and maybe in the future extend that. But what you're saying is that the catering facilities could then operate for the rest. So while you say 24/7, I think I just need to be clear that they would run alternatively, that we might have people in here throughout the day, but there would be set cafes times and set catering. Is that, have I got that right?
I would see the daylight hours with Tony Piccolo's idea of training and supplying a space for people with disability to learn skills, to gain hospitality skills and to be supported by family and friends. That then would also be open to anybody coming into the library, for instance, whatever. The rest of the time, often as with startup businesses, and it's not so much with the business hub now, but a lot of startup businesses are a second string. And so I know when I was doing catering, I had a full-time job. And so my cooking was done in the evening, or it was done on the weekends, ready for delivery. So you don't have that luxury of just doing it Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It has to be done when it has to be done.
So there's a number of ideas that have been thrown. I'm going to throw it up to anybody else that wants to make some comment. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, look, I love the idea, and it's great to hear the model already being utilised. I see some opportunity to be able to earmark certain hours throughout that 24-hour period over a 7-day week, and then maybe earmark, you know, just say if we set a Wednesday, so it's easy, to be able to look at the like what training opportunities we do have. I like the idea of how the Barossa are doing, you know, training in their civic centre to assist the businesses in the Barossa. I mean, we have cafes here, we have pubs, we have all these things. Imagine if you, I mean, I started work at the Java Hut when I was 16, 17 years old. Imagine if Donna there, who owns that great business, was able to get those 14, 15-year-olds and say, hey, look, I'm just going to send you off and you're going to do the barista course on the Wednesday that the Civic Centre offer, and then you're going to come in on the Saturday, our peak day, and you're going to know how to make coffees. You know, I'm oversimplifying it here, but the models, I think Gawler High actually have a model, seeing some nodding from David Barrett there. What's the name of that? Is it
16.
1613, is it? Or
it's got 16 in the name.
Yeah, which I
and
think,
that's for kids that struggle at school, and
yeah.
they've got their own catering company, and
Yeah.
they do pretty well actually.
Yeah, and like it's almost the next level of what home economics is in high school, and they offer trade certificates in hospitality, and also host some events. And some of those events, you know, it's almost like a hairdresser that's practicing. You get a cheaper haircut, but you get to practice on the head that's willing to do it. Same with tattoos and all that sort of stuff. So the merit there of having something set up like that. Imagine if you could grow that and there was a partnership with fringe events and all that, and the training would be real life events for people that were passionate about cooking. You'd obviously have to have an operator that was experienced in that space and knew how to manage the learners as being, you know, someone to teach. But yeah, just another thing to chuck in the mix. You know, I don't think it's a let's just rent it out sort of situation. I think there's mutual benefits that we can have from upgrading to what you're talking about, and what we'd be able to market to with that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I actually quite like the idea of upgrading to a commercial kitchen, even if it's a light commercial, whatever the term is. But I think that's proven that we do need to do something in that kitchen. I don't think there's any doubt. Now that's a matter for council when it comes to a council decision, but we're throwing ideas around the table, and I think that there has been caterers have come in and have said to me that kitchen needs upgrading. Even the caterers that come in, and David's nodding, he's accepting that, we've got a gap there. So I think that's an excellent suggestion. I love the idea of training. I also like the idea of social inclusion. I think that's a really worthy idea. How we meld the two will need to be done very carefully, I think. But if there's defined hours for the social inclusion cafe, for example, you could bring in other things on a Saturday morning or even on a Wednesday night. But it also requires a resource from council. I might throw to David, and just you're hearing some of these suggestions, so I might actually throw to you of what your thoughts are.
Thank you, Mayor. So as we know, anything's kind of possible, but as the Mayor's alluded to, resourcing is a challenge in that space. If we were to operate it as a social inclusion cafe for set hours, that's fantastic. We just need to ensure that at the end of that set hours, it was fully cleaned down, packed down, all those sorts of things, managed transition, and then people coming in being managed in the same way, and ensuring that they clean down and pack down, because the last thing you want is someone walking into a
Dirty
mess
kitchen.
of a kitchen, or the next day wanting to open to trade and you can't because things aren't there or dirty and all those sorts of things. So there is a fair bit of operational consequence on that, and also managing a bookings side of things, there's operational consequences in there as well around access provisions, inductions, cards, keys, all those bits and pieces. So if it was going to be that, we as council would need to consider resourcing allocations in terms of human as well as infrastructure resourcing to develop it up to a commercial standard that anyone could walk in and use and then clean and walk out without having to bring items with them.
Because that's been a challenge, hasn't it?
Yeah, so in the past, the council has had the opinion that the operator would bring that infrastructure, and they have to an extent, but neither of our operators actually went to the extent of getting a dishwasher, for example.
Yeah.
So it was all hand wash. If you're going to the commercial operations, you can't have that hand wash facility for the things we're talking about. It needs to be a proper commercial grade dishwasher and glass washer within the facility to make it work.
So just on that, the capacity of that kitchen to be able to accommodate that, your thoughts on that?
Certainly. So there is plumbing in existence within the facility to accommodate a commercial dishwasher. It was just an investment that council didn't have at the time. The challenge is actually going to be around the commercial cooking side of things in that space, and specifically the exhausting. We had a really big challenge with exhausting in the space to get what we've got, the ducting, etc., through the complexities of the levels of the building, make it limited to the capacity of exhaust that we can actually accommodate. So, for example, we couldn't have decent deep fryers in there because there's insufficient exhausting capability. So there'd have to be a significant investment in terms of exhaust to make it.
So you need a separate exhaust system? Is that what you're suggesting?
I would be suggesting yes. It's just trying to get it there because of the intricacies of the building. Where the cafe kitchen is, it's actually below the mezzanine high street level loading dock. And then to get to exhausting, you've got to go above the innovation hub. So you've actually got to navigate 2.5 floors of infrastructure to get out. And there's no way out the back because that's going underneath High Street, if that makes sense. So you can't go directly out. So it's complex to navigate exhausting. So that's something we'd have to consider. And there'd be a fair bit of design work required and investment to make that happen.
You had your hand up, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just quickly, are we able to have a tour of the space after this?
Yeah, we
Bit of-
could. Yeah,
a bit of a
absolutely. That's a
walk
good
through.
idea. Yes.
I mean, that would be pretty handy. And then also, we were talking about resourcing before. That's the sort of beautiful thing about this model being carried out by other areas. It'd be interesting to see what resourcing they have in that model and how that actually works. Because yeah, I guess the system would have to come into play that if you're a member of a organisation that can come in and rent that kitchen space, there are certain terms and conditions we expect that membership to follow. So I assume that system already exists for these other models.
So, sorry, through the chair, one question, Louise, in the models you've mentioned being commercial kitchens available for hire, do those kitchens also operate day-to-day trading out of the kitchen?
I don't believe so, David. I spoke to them on the basis of it being a commercial kitchen for hire, not that they were sending food out themselves. Ben Stokes, as I said, is very happy to show anybody what he's doing. And my understanding was that he just has it going out on an hourly basis.
Okay, thank you. Now, Paul Kosh, you had your hand up.
Look, I mean, good idea, but could we just look at the limitations of the space before we even start thinking about this? Because if we find the exhaust might cost you, I don't know, a couple $100,000.
Oh, no, absolutely.
You know,
We don't have information on
Yeah,
how much it's going to cost.
That's the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah,
because
these are just ideas.
I know, but we
These are
just be
ideas.
careful we don't get too excited and get carried away, because you might find that just the exhausting might cost you a couple $100,000. You know, and now we find out that it's a commercial kitchen, but it's not providing restaurant, it's not providing a service. So it's actually, we're trying to meld two different models together, you know, and yeah, I mean, I just, you know, I'd like to see all the facts before we even start thinking about it.
Look, I
what we
think
could
David's
do.
been honest in just some of the limitations, and we will go down there and have a look at the space, because it's a big enough space. But it's just on, you know, the almost lower ground floor. It's just down. It's sort of down a little bit, but yeah, Councillor Hennessy.
I hear you, Councillor Kosh, I absolutely agree. However, what we have, and I think it's really important to acknowledge, is a lot of community support in continuing to see a cafe in some form in that space. So given the experience of the past two, I think we have to think laterally of how else that space can work. We've already used caterers for functions here, and they've given us some really valuable feedback. And as far as I know from the, you know, the research I've done, there isn't another commercial, as Louise says, in the town, commercial kitchen. And it's not only the caterers that would be using that. I've also had some feedbacks from some of the clubs and organisations who could think that they might maybe once a year rent a space like that to do something for their fundraising. You know, the range is pretty wide at this stage, but I'm struck by how much the community wants to see this succeed. They recognise it's not a commercial, and in fact there's some concern that it tries to be commercial against the commercial in Main Street. But the whole social enterprise, which is what it was when we very first did the design of this place, that was part of the brief. So they want to see that happening. On a second matter, can I just throw it in? And this relates to Deputy Mayors. When we go down there, the other thing that's been raised really strongly with me is that the space is not working in terms of ambience. It's a bit brutal. It's a bit bare. And I again go back to when the architects are sat down with their brief and we discussed what this space was to be. And the architects came back with an idea that that space was going to be designed as a flow-on or a sitting room for the library. And it came from many other examples in the state and interstate as well, where libraries are no longer very confined boxes, they free flow. So when the library opened, it didn't actually have a lot of seats in it. The reason was the sitting room was the cafe space. And I don't think that's really worked. And I think there's some things that could happen to make that work better. Some lounge chairs, some more comfortable stuff. At the moment, it's very much you wash and wear very, very plain. The soundproofing is not, the sound again is not particular. So I think it's not only what are we going to see in terms of commercial operation, but I'd really like staff to come back with some ideas. We're starting to see little bits of it, like some exhibitions, but it's really not attractive. For those of us who've been to civic events and tried to have a dinner down there, it is certainly not.
No, you do need, if you're going to have a cafe though, you need somewhere, you can't have everyone sitting in a lounge chair.
No.
A lot of people can't sit in.
No,
lounge
it
chairs.
would need to be absolutely a mix.
So you need a
Yeah.
mix. Yeah.
But you don't want, what you don't want is something that's, you know, really, well, we're going to have a look.
Okay, I've seen councillor Vallelonga, councillor Hughes, and then councillor White.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the first bit,
That's all right.
but we've sort of got experience with the cafe that was on the hospital site in the Gawler Health Service. And they were, I think it was nearly up to $20,000 the hospital was actually putting in to keep it operating. And really they've gone to machines. So it was a lot of effort to try and keep that cafe, even though they had a huge number of staff on site and patients as well on site. And yeah, they struggled. It's been closed a couple of years now, but they had basically, dare I say it, like a captive audience of patients and staff on site, and they have fully gone to machines, and that seems to work well. But I do like the idea of trying to have the social enterprise. I've seen the barista classes here in the youth shack area absolutely full. But yeah, I do think there is a really big balancing act here, because we could be spending a lot of money as well. So I think there's quite a lot of investigations need to be happening, and to try and sort of use the space as best as possible. I agree it's not the most attractive space, but if you want to often meet ratepayers and things like that down there, and it's quite good to do that. I think it's quite effective, but it just does need a bit of softening, but it's a balancing act. And it is, we were here on Saturday for a workshop, and it was interesting the mix of people that were using the computers and
Reading the paper.
Reading the
Reading the
paper.
paper.
Yeah, so there are people around, but we've got a number of cafes in the main street that are really good. So I think it's probably going to have to be some sort of a hybrid, probably food machines, coffee machines, and some training or certain hours and catering for events or something like that. But it's going to be a mixture, I think, to keep it going. And I think at the end of the day, I suppose it'll be up to council how much it's going to invest in that as well. And I think we really need the partnerships with the business development group or other groups really to justify it to the community. I think the council doing it on its own, I think it does it really well on its own with the youth training and stuff, but I don't think we should be operating in that space, because it'll be quite labour intensive and everything else as well. And as David said, we're going to have to check to make sure the place is cleaned up properly and everything else. So there's going to be some extra work for staff. But yeah, it'd be good to have a walk around downstairs as well.
Ethan.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had two quick questions. First one was for Louise. You mentioned about there's lots of commercial kitchens in Adelaide or that have got equipment for sale, or there's places that have got equipment for sale, auctions. Yeah, are you meaning like almost new equipment? Like, yes, so things that have hardly been used that are, yeah. So this might be more for Henry, but does council's process of acquiring, say, commercial kitchen equipment, are we able to use second-hand equipment, or does it need to be new or from, you know?
I might get David to answer.
Yeah,
that.
thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
The short answer is yes, we could. We just need to do it from a value assessment to ensure that we're getting the right equipment for the right price that has the longevity that we want. and not sacrificing that because we've gone with secondhand. So that would be a balance in that procurement. Yeah.
Doesn't address the flu, does it really?
No, we wouldn't be able to get a secondhand exhaust system to retrofit into the
that would
space.
work.
No.
Yeah, but there's other opportunities there, of course, yeah. Yes.
Thanks, yeah, I'll keep an eye out on Gumtree for an exhaust flue, if we find one, you know. The other question was, at the moment, this space here is hired out for events and functions. Is the kitchen a part of that, or can be hired out as well? And if
They do use the kitchen, but they tend to bypass the kitchen because it's just not
Yeah.
fit for purpose.
yes,
And I know that I've spoken to some caterers and they've said that it's a real challenge, you know, because they just don't have the equipment. They have to bring most of the things in. And as David said, they've got to hand wash everything.
Mm.
You know, that slows everything up.
Mm.
Now, given that, there's been some really fantastic meals being produced and delivered here by caterers, external caterers. So, yeah, but, you know, it's clear that the kitchen is not fit for purpose. And now I hear what Councillor Kosh is saying, you know, we do need to be sensible. In the Local Government Act, we have to take into the financial impact of our decisions. So we need to be mindful of that. But these are just ideas that we're throwing around the table at the moment. So, yeah.
yeah. And I guess the advantage, if something like this happened, the kitchen was upgraded for functions and events, etc., then all of a sudden we've got another space that can be utilised or hired out for the community. So I guess that's another attraction if you're looking for a space.
All these spaces are flexible. We're in here because, you know, the motherboard's blown up in there. And so we can move around. They're really flexible spaces, and it's exactly the same down in that foyer. Everything can be moved around, but it tends to be the same. And when you've got computers, people need to access their computers. So where do we put them? You know, and is that the best place for the computers? So there's a whole range of opportunities of how you change things around. And during the Fringe, I know Linda does an enormous and fabulous job changing things around, putting things up, and it looks really festive, doesn't it? You know, and lots of colour. And I think that's what Helen's alluding to. There's just no colour down there, and it is very boring. I know Red Centre Enterprises tried to put plants, but most of them died. Because it's no light.
Yes.
So I don't know if plants will work, but I'm not a gardener, clearly. There does need to be a bit of colour, and we need to do that carefully because we've got stone walls that we don't want to destroy because we spent a shitload of money on those stone walls, and you know, that's really important that we don't destroy them. But there's always opportunity.
No, thank you.
Councillor Samble.
Thanks, Mayor Karen. I've just been on my 2,000 kilometre trip all the way down the southeast in Western Victoria. And because I'm a brain-washed tourist, I went into all the tourist information office. And I spoke to David about it before. We've all heard of coffee machines and we've all heard of vending machines. And we've all heard of the latest things when Ethan wants to go and do a trip somewhere. He doesn't go into a visitor centre. He looks on his Googles and all the rest of the things he looks at. So the value, as I have just experienced over 2,000 kilometres of visitor information centres, is dead. And I mean that sincerely. And I'm talking about big information centres, like at Warrnambool especially, are huge if you've been there. Recently, I was up at Darwin, flew to Darwin, and the first thing I did when I got off the plane, I wanted a cup of coffee and something to eat, you know, just a little snack. And there was a complete row of about 12 vending machines. And I had a perfect choice of what to pick out. And I'll tell you what, the coffee was as good as you'll buy anywhere and so forth, by just putting the money in and pressing it and so forth. And the same with a lot of the visitor centre, Lucendale and places like that, that I went to, Narracoorn and so forth. The vending machine thing is in. We already have one at the Sport and Recreation Centre. So if you go down there and you feel like a coffee, I know the other day after our meeting here, everybody popped next to Zebo and came back with a coffee, you know, because we feel like that, because we don't really get a good coffee here and so forth. And I really believe we should look at that, because as Paul said, you know, like, we just don't want to, again, I'd hate to think what we've lost already since that's happened. And I agree with Helen. It's a beautiful spot. But to the average person that comes to Gawler as a visitor, as a tourist, anybody that comes any more than 50 kilometres is a tourist to this town. And they walk down Murray Street. So they want to come in, visit the library or visit exhibitions or whatever it may be. But they don't expect to come in and get a meal like they'd get at the restaurant there or Zebo's or whatever. But when they come in, they pick something up, information. When they do come in, there's nothing in here, in this area and in the library, because I can't take any more information. What can I see while I'm here in Gawler? Now, hang on a minute. Walk back up the street and go to the Visitor Information Centre. Fight your way through all the artist work as you get through the door. And yes, you'll get the information from our wonderful volunteers. Why not a pop-up area in this beautiful area that Helen said here, and the vending machines, so they can come in, pick it up, pick up information about the town, and then spend more time here and so forth. I think we've got to look at that. The vending machine works, and if you want to try it out, go down to Bob James tomorrow and walk in there and get a coffee, because I was there today. Magic. And all I did was press a button. And these vending machines cost us nothing. You know why they cost us nothing? Because they work on a commission. That right, David? Or, you know, the one down the Sport and Rec. But you can get food and everything. And like I had tonight, Subway meal, fantastic, and so forth. We've got to look at a better way of operating that beautiful space, and by giving people in our town something when they come here to stay longer. That's a great spot for a pop-up tourist shop to promote our town.
I'm going to go to Councillor Lorna now.
I understand what you're saying there, Brian. We do need something for the information session down there. Personally, I would be highly offended, if not insulted, if we put vending machines in our premises that took patronage away from any of our cafes. I don't see it being the right thing. That money's going off to some other mob outside of Gawler. I really don't think that we need to be putting any form of cafe in this area here at all. We've got plenty of cafes, but I really do like the idea of the training facilities, as Louise said, and I'll write down some of my notes here. Something for the community, your basic healthy cooking on a budget option, I think is a really good idea. I know Councillor Koshy's got concerns about money in that, which I also have that as well. We spend a lot of money on the swimming pool that I never go swimming in. I don't care that I pay for it because it's great for the community. Now we can bring a heap of people into the area, give them some help with some extra life skills, helping people come together and experience different ways of cooking, eating, looking after themselves, actually being an influence in the community. Yeah, that's what I think.
I'd quite like the idea of bringing in guest presenters. I think that's a really good idea. I do like the social inclusion idea. If we're going to utilise that space and use it as cooking cafe, we've got to look at the kitchen area, because I think you'll find that people won't come back. But that's just my personal view. I think that I think we do need to look at that space, but it's how we present that to the community. And I don't particularly like vending machines. I think that I've had some pretty ordinary meals through vending machines. I think that would be a shame if we went down that road. But in our premier space, but yeah, look, it really is. There's lots of ideas on the table. So, I'm going to go to, I think you've had lots of opportunity, Councillor Hennessy, so I'm going to go to Councillor Solomon and Councillor Davies now.
Thank you, Mayor. It might be more a question for David, but I guess David mentioned in there before, some of that having the community groups and training, interchanging, and some people have mentioned how that might also fit with Louise's idea of the commercial kitchen. So I guess what side of, how do you sort of manage that? What kind of arrangement does that actually look like to have all three purposes operating in there? But also, what would community groups going in there look like? Is that something similar to like they're hosting events and functions out of there, or is it more similar to like what's happening with the, the Hope Chapel food truck in Gawler West, where they're providing meals for people, in need?
So thank you, Councillor Solomon, through the chair. Management of the space would be human resourcing essentially to ensure that it's all coordinated seamlessly between each of the functional areas. In terms of community groups, there's many different models that you can apply. I do know that the Barossa Farmers Market, for example, their food service out there is run by community groups on a weekly basis. So a community group has it for the week, and then the next one comes in the next week, but it's a set menu. Every community group cooks the same thing. There are set standard operating procedures and all these sorts of things. So it's the same output from the cafe, whilst the quality may vary depending on which group is cooking any given week. So there's an opportunity around that, around set processes. If you wanted to do different projects out, it does complicate the market side of things. So people coming to the cafe wouldn't know what they're going to get, for example, but it's not delivering events out of the cafe, so to speak, if that makes sense, Councillor Solomon.
So with the human resource for council, would you need a full-time person to manage that?
Depends on how much of everything is being delivered, and we'd need to nail down and work that out. So I can't give that an exact answer without knowing how far we're going, unfortunately.
So if community groups were doing it every week, would
That is a full-time role with the Barossa Farmers Market area, yes.
Yeah.
But it's a component of their full-time. They coordinate the whole thing. So again, I'd need to investigate the hours required to ensure that that was facilitated.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Davies.
Yeah, let's see. I've got a few miscellaneous things here. I agree with Mick about the, not necessarily competing directly with cafes. I think that was part of the issue previously. Is if you were there in Gawler before 3 p.m, Chibo's is there. If you're there in Gawler after 3 p.m, Chibo's isn't there, and neither is any other cafe, but neither was the Gawler cafe. So that's one area where a vending machine could fill a hole, is the 3 to 5 p.m. Coffee market. But other than that, I think, I also agree with Helen about the space. This is something we found when we were working with the youth shack before the youth space, because the youth shack is a much bigger area than the current youth space, but it was much less viable because we couldn't commit to it. It was just bring out the plastic chairs, have your event, if you're feeling fancy, you can wheel out the little foosball thing or whatever, and then put it back so that the, ukulele club can meet there tomorrow. And I think that leads to a sort of neither here nor there situation. And I think, the potential to commit to what we want out of that space, the sort of the outside of the library space.
You've got a lot in that space. You've got computers. How many? 6 computers back to back. You've also got the journals that are in large movable stands, and then you've got the sort of whatever you call it, the blanket box. I call it a blanket box. That it's grey. And then you've got a little bit of a space, and you've got that big table with the high chairs that hardly anyone can sit on. And then you've got the cafe chairs and tables. And you got a round table, I think, as well. It's quite busy, quite a busy space, lots in there.
Yeah,
And look, I get why the library moves that stuff out, because it makes it easier to move around. But yeah, it does create a very busy space. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it wasn't, the original plan wasn't to have the computers in there, and it wasn't to have the journals in there. It was meant to have other decor. Yeah, it wasn't meant to have that in there, but it's become that because we need the space, I guess. Yeah. Who else wants to have a go? Louise, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I have to agree completely that it cannot be something that takes business away from established businesses in Gawler that are paying commercial rents. Fortunately, we now can get coffee at Cafe at 126 up until 4:30.
That's right.
So that's an improvement. And I'd just like to make the point that social inclusion doesn't necessarily mean people with disabilities. It actually does mean any sort of community group. So it could be the Lions Club putting on a huge fundraising dinner. You know, there are a lot of other aspects for social inclusion. And the space is not conducive to just a cafe, but if it actually has a point, then that can be promoted and be supported because it would be part of the social inclusion. But just having it as a cafe is, well, it's, for me, being chair of the Gawler Business Development Group, it's just the antithesis of what we should be doing, because we should in fact be supporting the businesses. They're the ones that are paying the rates.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, we're talking about the models and how it would work with multi-use and everything like that. And picking up on what Louise said, you know, I see the potential to be able to have year 12 formals up here, you know, and have it catered for to a level that would come to expect on a higher level, a beef and burgundy night for a footy club, a prezos, you know, all those sorts of things. But the model, and I'm probably going to oversimplify this just, and again, I apologize, Louise, if I'm taking your idea here, but the way I look at it is the same way Airbnb works. You're a member of the Airbnb and you agree to certain guidelines and rules, and you enter the property under those guidelines and rules, and you leave that property the way you expect to leave your own home. Having those terms and conditions outline the expectation of the space, and whatever use goes in that space is the same membership, the same terms and conditions. So whether or not it is the, you know, the second job caterer that comes in and wants to start cooking at 9 p.m, or it is the Lions Club, it doesn't matter because it's all earmarked for the times that are available. And like any Airbnb, most are owned privately. So if I own a shack and I choose to Airbnb it out, I earmark the Wednesday or the Saturday or once a month for me and my family to go down. And there is nothing stopping us to do that in that space as well, if we find that training consistency that we can earmark for, we find that social inclusion that we can earmark for. But those uses follow the same membership. So that's sort of, yeah, the way that I'm picking up your idea and how I interpret it.
Thank you. CEO, you want to say anything?
Again, thanks everybody for your creative ideas, and Louise for your thoughts. Whatever we do and whatever investigations we pursue, the more complicated it is, the more time it's going to take. And to what extent can we have some interim activities and activation down there that is as easy as possible from an operations perspective? And I think it goes to what you're saying, Nathan, in terms of pop in and pop out. I'd like to be able to just ring up the Apex Club and say, look, do you think you might be able to use the space for some benefit and come and try something? Or the Zonta Club or the Lions Club, and just have, over the next couple of months, trial it out with different community groups, have an informal approach and try to make it as uncomplicated as we can make it, just to see how it might work. Firstly, it creates some activation. We get a sense of the community's interest in using it, and concurrently we can start investigating these other options. And I'm just thinking that that first soft approach might be the start of the social inclusion model. You know, that's just a thought relative to a possible two-pronged approach. That's all.
Okay, so I think what we might do now is go and have a look at the space. I apologise to people who might be watching on YouTube, but I think it's important for all of us to have a look at the space and get a fair idea of what we're talking about and just understand the place that's downstairs. So thank you, everyone. We'll just sign off for probably 15 minutes and come back and have a final discussion. Thank you.